Welcome to video 5 in a series of videos about how to engage fully, important word, in a crisis or the crisis we are facing with the coronavirus pandemic and the collapse of our economies, and then how to engage in the future crises as an individual, family crises, deaths, disease, loss of jobs, loss of livelihoods, right through to the climate crisis and other crises that are likely to hit us in what I think is a perfect storm of crises from industrialization, so that's climate, carbon, global warming, rising sea levels, pollution, microplastics, the crisis of identity, who we are we British, American, Republican, Democrat, male, female, gender, the crisis of identity, which is causing a lot of inter-tribal, ethnic conflict and pain and suffering. The illness crisis, crisis of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, post-industrial illnesses, as well as mental health problems, personality disorders, mood disorders, anxiety, depression, etc. And the fourth crisis, the crisis of inequality, where today half of all global citizens are only ever one paycheck or crop failure away from destitution. And in fact, just this morning I read about a couple who were living up until 3 weeks ago in a part of England as a painting. One of them was a painting decorator, and when the pandemic hit and their rent ran out, they're now living in a tent in the streets of a city because they didn't have anything more than that. So this is a series about how to engage fully in any crisis and how to metabolize the crisis, metabolize any problem, really, any challenge, into value. And that's what my life's work is about. So I am Nick Jankel. I've spent a long time from studying science to practicing systemic change projects, leading and designing systemic change projects, as well as lots of individual work with individuals for their own inner transformation. And I've put all that together into a methodology, a philosophy that has a pathway, a set of principles, 7 of them here, and practices for how to transform anything that isn't working in your world, from the smallest to the largest level, from self to system. And biotransformation theory, BTT, is that. So before I forget, if you want to stay in touch with all the practices, tools, projects, programs that we are doing and launching, please sign up at switchonnow.com. At the footer, in the footer, there's an email newsletter to sign up. Subscribe to this channel if you want to know when more videos are coming out. I'm planning to do quite a few over the next few weeks, months and years. And do watch the other videos, of course, if you want to catch up on what's happened, because we're building on quite a few foundations. So these are the 7 gems of biotransformation theory. And I'm just going to look back at this, which is the 7 steps of the transformation curve, just to remind us what's going on here. So this is what I believe is the universe's, nature's archetypal blueprint journey of all transformation of any type. We start here at a plateau that starts to lose ground. We start to lose a fit with the world. This is the world that's moving in this direction, and we are losing a fit with it. So we have a choice. Do we fit the changing world? Do we fit the future? Or do we fail the future because we fade from relevance? So if we decide we want to fit the future and maybe even forge the future, we must choose consciously in our heart and mind to go on this kind of journey where we start to understand how we show up with this problem, in this problem, because we can't change necessarily the problem itself, although we might be able to up here. What we can certainly change is how we react or respond to it. The first step is ownership of the problem, bringing it inside us, where we can do whatever we can to alchemize or metabolize the problem into something of value. We look at how we usually show up in our patterning, and underneath the pattern is the pain, trauma, wounding that is locking that pattern in place. And that can be individual trauma, family, ancestral, right up to societal trauma. Then if we are able to heal that pain by feeling it fully within the context of a larger experience of connection, because all trauma and pain comes from disconnection, from our caregivers, from ourselves, from society. We can then release the pain, and in the peace that follows, we can listen and hear and receive creative insights, ideas, imaginative solutions, innovations, which we can turn into possibilities, and then over time develop those possibilities into new patterns, new behaviors, new thoughts, new feelings, new senses in our body, that deliver a transformational shift as we become closer to the fit to the world. Not better or worse than the before, just a closer fit, a better order, a higher degree of order, of complexity and variety that fits the ever more complex and variable world. So in this video, I'm going to look at, okay, so we're traveling along this journey, and we're all in one of these journeys somewhere. We may not know it, but we're all on a transformation curve in all areas of our life. We just may be stuck in a place. We may be stuck and actually going on a decline because we're not consciously realizing that this issue in our marriage, or this issue in our relationship to ourself, or health, or money, or children, or our parents, or friends, or bosses, or the system, the man, we're not recognizing it as a challenge for us. We're projecting onto others. So we're going down a breakdown decline, but we're somewhere on this board in every area of our life. So I want to give you some ideas about what might be happening here. So as this is occurring, this side, the old is breaking down. Now we can accelerate that internally through our own introspection, reflection, and transformation process, or it will just happen to us because it's no longer a fit with the world. But this side, the left-hand side, is all about the old breaking down. And this right-hand side is when the new breaks through. And down here, I think of this as the unified field of the universe, the quantum field, or you could think of it in wisdom traditions as the ground of all being, in Kabbalah, Ein Sof or Shekinah, in Plotinus's work, a Greek philosopher, the One, and from that One, new ideas and insights come to us. And our job as a human on this process, and I think human beings are currently the only species I am aware of that can consciously travel this curve and consciously choose to go through it to bring the new into the world, to solve problems that we haven't solved before, like how to deal with a global economy hit by a virus. And we can bring insights from the future into the present, as well as knowledge from the past into the present. So at any point, we are on this journey. We might be here as a human being. And what's interesting, coming back to philosophy again, metaphysics, because all transformational theories, all change theories have to have a metaphysics. Most people don't want to see or maybe think about what their metaphysics is because it means real discernment and reflection on your own assumption base. But what I think goes on is we have information from the actual world, the physical material reality that exists, this stuff, measurements, data, that coming to us from the past. And we have information, and this is quite interesting, some form of information from the future coming to us in the present, if we can open to receive it. And this might sound very strange to some people, but I've led maybe 200 corporate and governmental innovation programs with really serious people who are very rational and materialist in their philosophy, believe in science, believe in stuff, data, hard evidence. And whenever we do innovation, there's always insight coming from somewhere. And it can't come from the past because it doesn't exist in the past. It's coming from somewhere. So I think of it's coming from the future, from a possibility space, or what some people call the adjacent possible. What's adjacent to where we are here that can come to us now. We can't get stuff from here, we can only get stuff from here. And what that sets us up for is to realize that we have quite an important role to play as an individual or as a group to channel, if you like that word, I think of it more like a cell receptor channel. We can channel stuff from outside the cell into the cell, just as ion channels in our nerves channel things from outside to inside. So we are become a channel for information from the past and insights from the future about how things could be into the moment where we get to decide what to do now. And the philosopher slash physicist, quantum physicist David Bohm, one of the top quantum physicists of the world, of his era, talked about this as information from the what I call the possible future or the possible world unfolding into the actual world. He called this the implicate order and the explicate order. So we get to turn what's possible into what's actual, as in ideas, imagination, into actual tangible reality. And I read something that really brings us to life very recently. So there are roughly 20 amino acids that make up every protein. And our proteins are the building blocks of our cells, of our body, of our nerves, of our neurotransmitters, of oxytocin, of acetylcholine, of dopamine. Incredible things. But just by understanding the genetic code, the DNA of a protein, because of the possibilities of how many protein, a way it could fold and arrange itself, it's almost impossible for us to predict how it will look in reality, in material reality. However, scientists have discovered that if you can understand the evolutionary history from the past of this particular protein, you can have a pretty good go at understanding how it will be in the present. And then scientists are now bringing their own imagination of proteins they'd like to see from the future, don't exist yet, and are starting to be able to generate proteins in the present that could help us with diseases, with aging, illness, all that kind of stuff. It's an example of human beings channeling future possibility and insight together with past data from what proteins have actually been folding and the code of the DNA, and coming together to invent the new, to forge the future. Hopefully a better fit with our post-industrial diseases of diabetes and heart disease and dementia and anxiety, etc. So what we have to do is we have to be able to shift between listening to the possible world and understanding the actual world. Being very good at understanding the past, so studying history, social science, maths, normal hard science, as well as being able to listen to the future. And that's what a transformational person or transformational leader needs to be able to do. So another way of putting that is to go back to these two modes of consciousness, by transformation theory Gem 2, which I've talked about on other videos. It's really key that we have these two modes of consciousness that seem to be linked to specific brain networks in our brain and the different parts of the autonomic nervous system in our body. And we end up being able to have information from the past coming into control and protect mode, and information from the future coming into create and connect mode. And I'm going to show you that actually creates 4 types of information, which I call the 4 guidances for us. So I'm going to rewrite these 4 elements of all human being, of every pattern, of every behavior, here as the 4 H's, so hands, head, heart, hara. And here we have control and protect mode. And here we have create and connect mode. And so what seems to happen, and this is pretty wild and amazing, and what makes us so different as a species, so we think, is that in our heads and hands, the top 2, cognitive behavioral phenomena, we get from the past, we get information. So this is best looked at as data, and as we know, data is always about the past. This is where the realm of science, it's the realm of metrics, it's the realm of KPIs, it's the realm of study, of hard things that actually happen from the past. And then in our heart and hara, in our felt sense, information from the past comes to us as instinct. So, don't put your finger on that hot plate. Get out of the way of the bus because you can sense something. And it's a survival instinct, right? We have this past-based learning not to do certain things because they've been threatening in the past, or we've learned them through stories that they're threatening, and we have a very powerful emotional interoceptive response for instinct. But we also have two other forms of information which allow us to make really difficult decisions in crises. The first one in our heart and harrow is not instinct but intuition. It's a deep but quiet, profound, felt sense that something is possible in this moment that hasn't come from the past, it's come from somewhere else. And I discern that as intuition versus instinct. They can feel quite similar. They're often come pre-cognitive, pre-behavioral. They haven't arrived yet up here, but we can feel them nonetheless. Instinct's very loud. It needs to survive. It needs us to survive. Intuition is very quiet. It's the still small voice of calm. And we can't hear intuition unless we know how to calm our instinct. And then as the intuition turns into thoughts, we have insights matched with information, and we need to be hopefully good at all four of these because they're all four fundamentally of value. And insights then turn into ideas, innovations. This is the realm of imagination and other eyes. These are the four guidances that we all get in every moment. And part of our job as transformational people, if we want to be, is to be able to distinguish, discern, and develop consciously all four of these types of information, so that we can make really good sense-making decisions and action decisions. The challenge we've got, we've talked about it already, I've talked about it already, is that we have some really powerful cognitive biases and instinctual threat responses, survival responses, that often swamp this area. And that happens in sense-making, in systems thinking, in sense making, when we're trying to make sense of something like a pandemic and what's going to happen next week or next month, as embedded narratives that we already are emotionally attached to, flooding our body with meaning making systems, with lenses that try to make sense of the chaos and the crazy down here in the edge of chaos, but aren't necessarily right because they're from the past, no matter how clever we are. In fact, one of the challenges of all innovation and leadership is it's not really about how clever we are, it's about how wise we are. This is cleverness, this is wisdom, and they are different. So smart, this is what school teaches us and management programs, and this is wise, and we want to be both, right? We don't want wise people who don't understand data, information, science, etc. But we've also got a plethora of very smart people in systems thinking, in business, in strategy, in policy development, but they're not very wise. And the problem with that is, if you remember from science, nature abhors a vacuum. But I believe human nature abhors a vacuum of meaning. So in this space, we don't have a meaning system yet because we're trying to make sense of the future coming towards us. We're here, I'm standing here, I'm traveling on this transformation curve. I've got the past coming towards me, to information, both DNA information in my body mind, but also data and thoughts and meaning-making systems and theories up here. But I've also got stuff from the future coming, and I can't get insight about the future and intuition about the future if my meaning-making systems are so embedded and I'm so clever that I'm projecting onto the future things from the past. And in fast-changing worlds like the one we're in right now, that is a mismatch, it's a fail, because we won't be able to discern and listen to intuitions and insights and ideas which are very quiet, they're intuate, they're nascent, they're fragile, and they can get crushed really easily by a meaning-making system of ourselves or our friends or our collaborators or clever people who we're reading articles in this place on Medium, and we take on their meaning-making system and deny our own insight. So we have to be able to balance the desire to make an action, close down possible meanings to lock onto a meaning, which is all smartness, as well as being able to watch out for premature closure, so closing down the possibility space, the meaning-making possibilities, the different lenses onto one be careful of closing too soon, locking onto one idea or one insight too soon. Be careful of things becoming too simple, but also of too complex, because we can't make sense of complexity, and certainly people who we are leading can't. So we can't be too complex or too simple. Simple, but no simpler, not simplistic. Be hesitant to confirm the meaning of Donald Trump doing X, or Boris Johnson doing Y, or the Chinese government doing Z, or the CEO of this company doing whatever. Be careful of locking onto a meaning, but we still have to act. So it's the great challenge of being a transformational person, and particularly being a transformational leader in challenging, dramatically changing times, is we have to, first of all, allow the old to break down, to come apart, without us falling apart. We have to hold space for possibility and for change, to guide people, to help them feel psychologically safe, to help ourselves feel safe without knowing the answer. So we can turn through the edge of chaos, turn through the bottom of the transformation curve, where new ideas and insights will come to us. But for always on this curve, which means always in life, being able to be in the midline, in the third way, by transformation, Gem 3, a creative harmony between seeming opposites, between being controlling with data and information and metrics, and being open to possibility from the future, connective and creative, insightful and intuitive. And our job, and this is why you might see me sometimes do this is not for me a religious move, it's a way of me remembering to come into the center of my midline in my body-mind, my one unified body-mind, so I can be poised to move into information and data, to controlling the world, to try and get rid of possibility, to try and manage chaos away so I can see simplicity, and also being able to go into creativity and connectivity and empathy and compassion. And we can't do innovation without empathy for the people we're innovating for, our kids right through to the global citizens of our world. And so we want to be somewhere in the midline always, between critical thinking, taking apart all these different things we're reading, these videos that are being shared, these memes, really looking at who wrote this, why did they write it, what's it serving them, how's it serving the existing power structures, how's it serving potential power structures, what's the evidence base for this, was it peer reviewed, what's the data set, can we look at the data set, is it open, can I make sense of it? That's all critical thinking over here. And then we also want to be not critical and not shutting down possibility, and we want to be in creative thinking. What's possible, what could happen? And the 4 eyes will help us on our journey between what is, and science is the master of the domain of what is. But science can't tell us what ought to be, as various philosophers have made it clear. This is what is, but we have to make a decision about what ought to be in the future as we move this way. And for that, we need extremely highly refined, intuitive and insightful capacities. So we build our own moral compass within us, because no existing rule book or law book, whether it's a religious moral code or a governmental moral code, which are always based upon the past and often are literally behind the curve because they're catching up with the changing world, particularly these days. No set of rules can ever tell us what to do in the moment. We've tried it, it doesn't work, because the moment's ripe, it's biodynamic, it's happening now. So we have to be able to make sense of what is from our moral sciences and our hard sciences, understanding the various different moral theories, utilitarianism, the golden rule, categorical imperatives, but we still all have to make a decision and a choice in the moment based upon our deepest intuitions about what's possible, not our instincts, which are fear-based, but our thrive-based intuitions and our creative insights. And whether you're talking about immunizing your children, or whether you're thinking about social distancing and those rules, or you're thinking about opening up the economy, every person has to make a choice, hopefully in the midline between these, what is and what ought to be. And that's a lifelong work of developing our capacity to do that, our moral compass. But one of the things that we have to bear in mind, and I invite you to retake this on, is that these intuitions and insights are signals of some sort in information theory. most influenced by a guy called Shannon. There's a signal and there's noise. And all our electronics have to deal with noise and trying to pick up a signal. This camera I'm looking into has lots of noise, and it has to try and create a signal, find a signal, and then create a video. The same for us as people, individuals. We have to try and reduce the noise in a system. And the noise can come from our instincts going, do this, no, he's an idiot, you're an idiot. Those are all deep instincts going, puff, puff, puff. They're noise. Data is noisy. But what's really noisy is all these videos and memes that fake news, half news. So please be careful before promoting them, because they do make a difference. People are taking, for example, the 5G conspiracy, and they've been destroying not 5G wireless towers, but normal ones. And one of them was destroyed right by the hospital that the UK government built for coronavirus victims who now can't use the phone to call their family to die. So these memes have these ideas, these narratives here can really drown this out and cause people to act in their hands in ways that are not generative. And then the other part of the pie of guidance that can help you is intuition, insights that get confirmed by the outside world. For example, you have intuition to call a friend, and then they call you that day. Or you've been thinking about X, and then you see on Facebook 3 posts about X. Those are what Jung and a physicist, quantum physicist called Wolfgang Pauli proposed are the outer reality here, confirming in synchronicities, they call it, or meaningful correspondences, or you can think of it as breadcrumbs towards the future. And if we become really attuned to those meaningful correspondences, those synchronicities, we can get confirmation about our intuitions and insights, so we can start to build a sense of trust in them. And we can also get confirmation from our loved ones, particularly people who are conscious and awake and discerning about those intuition and insights, and we can test them out in reality with them, and we can also test them out in practice, but small ways. So I've got this intuition to share more of my work. That was my intuition about this whole video series. And actually, since I've been putting it out there and it's messy and I'm making mistakes and the board's messy, I've been having loads of feedback that it's really valuable for people. So that's an example of testing out our intuitions before we go big, leave our jobs, and travel to another country and change our careers, for example. So, for the rest of this video, I'm going to return to this setup of control and protect mode, 2 modes of consciousness, create and connect mode, what I've called analytical consciousness, logical consciousness, separation consciousness, the consciousness that sees me and you as separate, and I can study you and study me as an objective scientist. I can have metrics about separate things. I can study physics, the separate particles coming together to interact within a system. And then we have this connective consciousness, what William James calls cosmic consciousness, where I get a sense of connection with others, with you, with the world, with nature. And there I get empathy, and I get insights from that empathy, from that relational field that really help me solve transformational problems. And what I've realized is that essentially we have these 2 forms of intelligence or capacity in the world that we get to choose to develop. And I'm now going to link into some of the great work in developmental theory, which is the study of how human beings develop over their lifetime. Most famously started with a psychologist called Piaget, studying how children form different types of intelligence as they grow old, and you can start to see stages around certain ages. Kids can go from having an understanding of the I am everybody to having, say, a theory of mind that this person has a different set of thoughts to mine, just for example. And then other people come on and develop this. A lady called Gilligan developed a feminist version. Then we've got Erik Erikson, developing a really interesting psychodynamic version of stages across adult lifespans. And I've taken all this content in, particularly also the work of Keegan and Leahy at Harvard Education Department, and developed what I believe are 5 stages of adult consciousness. So I'm interested in that transition from teenage consciousness into some form of young adult consciousness at the first stage, right up to what happens if we can consciously develop ourselves and choose to push ourselves into ever more complex and variable and capacities inside to fit the complex and variable world outside. We end up with these 5 stages. And they're really interesting and really important because they answer a lot of our questions about our own development and how capable we are of leading transformational journeys, of just having transformations ourselves, but also how we can make use of this kind of thinking to make real, tangible change in the world. And what I've been looking at is the difference between developing our smartness and developing our wisdom. So when we develop our smartness, I believe we get ever-increasing capacity for what I'm going to call cognitive complexity. So we go from thinking quite simple thoughts to right at the top, being able to understand complex adaptive systems, the dynamics of entire markets, how economics, history, sociology, anthropology, psychology, politics, hard science, literature, all interact in the human experience on the individual and the complex plane of an entire system, either a nation or a globalized nation. So as we get higher and higher in cognitive complexity, we can hold multiple thoughts at the same time, multiple frames that might contradict each other. We can look through different lenses. I'm going to look through the anthropology lens. I'm going to look through the postmodern lens. I'm going to look through the modern lens, scientific lens. I'm going to look through rational lens. I'm going to look through the wisdom lens. And we can deal with paradox. We can zoom in and out of individual behaviors, psychology, into group behavior, team, systemic change behaviors. That's all cognitive complexity, and essentially it's about the development of control and protect mode, predictive thinking, complex thinking. And that's where a lot of the developmental theories focus on that area, quite obviously because they came from hopefully a scientific background, analytical consciousness that's trying to analyze human behavior, human psychology. However, I believe there's another form of complexity which is based more in this area of the heart and the hara, the felt sense and the emotional sense, particularly within connect and create mode, create and connect mode, which is about developing our wisdom, which I call embodied wisdom. So embodied wisdom is about having empathy for people, getting into their shoes. It's about understanding our own triggers and patterns, how we feel when we react, how we feel when we open. It's about being able to have deep compassion for every human and other types of beings. It's about expanding our circle of interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh said, to expand beyond ourselves and our family and our tribe and our species, even to other species, nature, the natural world, the cosmos, and to feel the planet's pain as our own pain, to feel the abused children that are happening right now as pain as our own pain, and to be able to process that and act from that to metabolize anything into value along this curve. And that I call that embodied wisdom. And what this does is it sets up a developmental journey for ourselves as we become more complex thinkers, having